goes to the bathroom in the morning, she hears an imaginary soundtrack. The American went to the bathroom. Everything's dramatic with her. Everything's described in a way that it's straight out of a movie. Her form of narcissism causes her to be deluded, so she thinks that she's in a movie of her own making.
As we speak, H.G. Tudor, Harry and Meghan are being evicted from Frogmore Castle. They're being frog-marched out. I don't know if that's an inappropriate joke to make, so I'll edit it out if it was. But it's being said it's the only place they feel safe in the UK. Is this the way to deal with narcissists?
The best way to deal with a narcissist is to have nothing to do with them. So King Charles, with this strike of saying you're not allowed to live there any longer, is actually being done because he's a narcissist himself. So we're having some sexy narc-on-narc action here. So when Harry made his various disclosures in Spare, that, of course, with his observations about Charles and also his observations about Camilla, who, remember, is an extension of Charles in Charles's world, that will have rattled Charles's cage, will have threatened his sense of control. So Charles won't have liked that. So a way, therefore, of him nullifying that threat would be to turn around and basically say, you have a grace and favour property. If you don't show any grace, you're not going to get any favour. You're out. And this issues a notice of eviction. So he does that. Harry, of course, is indignant because he's played into this victim mentality as he's walked into this folie à deux that has occurred with his wife. And, of course, to her, that's a huge threat to control because nobody tells Harry's wife that she can't stay in a property, even though it's one that they don't live in very often. So in terms of is that the right way to deal with a narcissist? Well, if it's part of exorcising them from out of your life by saying you can't stay in that property any longer, the answer is yes. But expect with somebody like her, you will then get a raft of pity plays, which is what she's been doing. So, for example, the one of the supine publications that she regularly pumps some PR dollars towards, Hello, then immediately puts out, well, what about the children? Lilibet and Archie will not be safe because there'll be nowhere for them to stay. Pity play, big, bad, horrible grandfather, trying to conjure up some Dickensian idea of the two kids wandering around in the snow, with their asses hanging out. So,
do you think Meghan will and potentially Harry will actually believe that? Will they make themselves believe that's how that's what's happened to them?
She does believe that because the way that the filter of her narcissism works is that it will automatically interpret the behavior of Charles in a way that is perceived for her to act upon it. So rather than her just go, oh, well, and shrug, that's no good because she's not compelled to seek the prime aims, fuel, control, carriage traits, and residual benefits. So in the same way, if you experience a dry throat, it's uncomfortable. So you're thirsty. Your body's saying, Andrew, you're dehydrated, go and seek some hydration before it becomes worse. It's protecting you. Her narcissism has to do something similar. So what it does is it makes her paranoid. It makes her believe that Charles has got it in for her, that he's a horrible person. So then she's motivated to turn to people and say, look how horrible he is to me. Look how mean he is to me. So all those people go, oh, yes, poor you, Harry's wife. Isn't it awful that you're being treated that way? Which gives her fuel from their responses and allows her a sense of control over Charles because people agree that he's a big, bad, mean grandfather.
Although, I mean, this is something I pointed out last time we spoke, is I think we all are on this spectrum to an extent. I mean, you are, by admission, a narcissistic psychopath. Is that the right way around?
Yes.
Right? I don't think that I am, but I also, if I felt slighted in that way, would immediately want to sort of come into action and be like, hang on, you're the bad guy. And I'd tell all my friends, that person did a bad thing to me and I feel slighted.
You would feel slighted, although you wouldn't necessarily, you would put it amongst all of the evidence. So, for instance, if you were given a fair reason as to why that lease was terminated, you would say, okay, yeah, I perhaps don't like it, but I understand it. She sees it in a completely different way from the reality of what it is. So you as a non-narcissist will see it through a particular world lens, which is shared by many other people. And of course, you might not like it and you might grumble about it, but you wouldn't go to the lengths that she goes to in order to deal with that threat to control. For you, you have different coping mechanisms. So in some instances, you might make a song and dance about it, but only do so for a short period of time. In another way, you might go back to the person and say, look, can't we sort this out and have a chat about this properly and sort this out? I appreciate you want me to move, but there's this problem, and have a back and forth with them. In other instances, you might just say, well, at the end of the day, it is their property, that they've served me with the appropriate notice. I just have to go and look for something elsewhere. You have different coping mechanisms compared to what her coping mechanism is.
I think it's interesting that you picked up on Charles being a narcissist himself. Do you think it's almost impossible to grow up in that environment as a royal and not become something of a narcissist?
Well, when we say something of a narcissist, I prefer to say whether somebody is or whether they are not, rather than it being something of. Invariably, in that environment, you are going to have lots of narcissists. It follows like this. We go back in the mists of time for those that eventually united the kingdom. Who was able to achieve that? Somebody that maybe was charismatic, but more likely an individual that didn't trouble themselves about stamping on other people, didn't have any sense of remorse, i.e. has no emotional empathy. An individual that's driven, who believes that they're superior to everybody else, that believes that they're destined to govern all of these people. So that person is more equipped to get their hands on the bloody crown for the throne. And then once they're there, what's the most motivating thing that happens thereafter? You must have a male heir. You must have issue. It's almost like the singular concern of holding on to power is not only to stay on the throne, but to ensure that there's somebody there to follow you after. And we obviously saw what happened with Henry VIII and the pursuit of an heir there. So then you have a child. So therefore, there's a pretty strong chance that your genetic predisposition towards narcissism is passed down to your child. And then that child finds themselves in an environment whereby they're probably removed from their parents at an early age and have to be with a governess, that they have people around them that are bending of knee and kissing of hand. It's a completely unnatural environment where every whim is catered to because they are the crown prince. And they're in a gilded environment where if they treat somebody harshly, it doesn't matter. There's no repercussion because he is the crown prince. So who could thrive healthily in that kind of environment? Very few people. Now, it doesn't mean that automatically you're going to get narcissists producing narcissists, but invariably there's a strong chance that you're going to get one. And we see this throughout various royal families, including the one in Britain.
Yeah, well, I can totally imagine that. I mean, I get what you're saying about you either are one or you're not. I get that, but it still feels like a spectrum to an extent, and it still feels like one might be more of a narcissist than another.
I'm going to have to disagree with you there, Andrew, that you can have... If we talk about narcissistic traits, then there's certainly a spectrum there. But once somebody is a narcissist, you can have different types of narcissist, but one's not more of a narcissist than another. You might say that person's behavior is more extreme than another narcissist. They might be more violent. They might be more charismatic, but they're not more of a narcissist than another narcissist. They are all just narcissists. But if you've got somebody who is not a narcissist, you could say that person doesn't have many narcissistic traits, so they're not particularly proud, they're not particularly argumentative, they're not particularly vain. And then you could find somebody else, again, who's not a narcissist, but they're very vain, they're very proud, they show off a lot. So you would say that there is a spectrum on the narcissistic traits, but once you're a narcissist, you are a narcissist, and there's no spectrum there.
That's really interesting, like a switching of a switch, I should say. I'm just trying to think about all of them then. It's like you can't... Queen Elizabeth, I guess because she passed, it's almost like using the Lord's name in vain to an extent, isn't it? You don't want to say, would she have been a narcissist? Have you given that much thought?
The short answer to that is no, she wasn't. She was a normal.
Go on.
So what that meant was she exhibited emotional empathy, but also have to be remembered that people's behaviors with others are influenced by external stressors. So, for instance, she devoted herself for 70 years to service. She's never going to run up and give you a hug from the off, because that's not because she's uncaring, but that's just not the done thing. So the mantle of the monarchy that she took on shaped her behaviors towards other people, but she loved her children. And behind the scenes, of course, we've heard reports about how she would interact with her children. and the affection that she showed for them. But she isn't going to sort of turn up at the opening of a supermarket in Cleethorpes and go, all right, me muckers, and start hugging people, because not because she doesn't care, but because there's protocol and the way that's been shown. I have a friend. He's an empathic chap. Very much the case. I was strolling along the road one evening going to our local bar, and I bumped into him with his wife, and he was there with a small boy, and he's got 2 adult children. So I thought, who's this? And this little Downs child. And I didn't realize that each Friday for a couple of hours, he and his wife would look after this boy to give the parents a bit of respite. He didn't tell anybody about it. He just got on with it. Another time during the pandemic, he was seen delivering parcels. Now, he was a manager for the Royal Mail. So we thought, well, there's nothing unnatural there, because sometimes he rolls up his sleeves and he gets out there and he helps. But actually, he was doing food parcels of his own volition to vulnerable people. Yet, he was known in the workplace as an absolute ball breaker. Why? He was able to put on a work face, if you will, that it was able to turn a dial within himself whereby he didn't suffer fools gladly. And he wasn't a horrible human being, but the emotional empathy that he showed oodles of externally, he was able to dial down within a work scenario. So sometimes some people are able to alter their behaviors in the way that that individual can. And in other instances, people are affected by circumstance, which naturally causes them to behave differently. If you are being repeatedly abused by somebody, there comes a point where your emotional empathy gets eroded and your narcissistic traits come to the fore, and you may well lash out at your abuser. There are instances where if you're tired and worn down, that your patience and your emotional empathy becomes eroded, so you suddenly snap at somebody. So there is a movable feast, if you will, with regard to these traits, which is impacted upon by external stresses and external influences.
I suppose the story of your friends taking that child out maybe gets to the crux of the matter with Meghan Markle, because there's also, I suppose, an expected maybe stoicism, or you're not supposed to show off, certainly, about charitable deeds, whereas so that friend of yours was doing these charitable deeds but not trying to sort of gain status by doing so. And then with Meghan, I think what a lot of people are frustrated by are the claims that she's sort of a big feminist and she's helped all these people, and we're like, but I guess the difficult part for her is that if she is doing things in private without us knowing, that's not shaping the argument that we're having right now, then that's maybe unfair on her. Well,
the problem that she's got, of course, is if she had just embraced the institution which had welcomed her and then got on with the activities without making a song and dance about it, then people would have continued to have welcomed her. Or if it was said, this isn't for me, I want out, and then retreated quietly and went off and did all of those things without making a song and dance about it, people would go, okay, we don't know what she's doing. We don't care what people object to. And this is very typical of a narcissist, is look at me. I'm honestly kind and empathic. Why? Because I'm showing you what I'm doing. If you were, you would just get on with it. But it just so happens that whenever she does something, oh, look, there's a film crew there. Oh, look, there's photographers are there. Oh, look, she's staring down the lens. And also, and this is typical of certain narcissists, there's the bandwagoning that she engages in. There is no stamina involved. It's basically, I support the latest thing, whatever it might be. And I'm behind that now. And you look at this 40 by 40 thing that she purloined from Barack Obama. Where did it get to? Nothing happened with it. How's she getting on with the parental leave that she was squawking about securing for all the women in America? Football and quiet. Wasn't she going with Gloria Steinem and taking Washington by storm? What's happened to that? It's gone silent. So what she does is, it's big bang, look at me, I've got this great idea. So everybody goes, ooh, look at that. So she gets all this fuel. It allows her to control people and manage the facade. She's got what she needs. So her narcissism then says, you don't need to do the rest, love. You've got what you need. And narcissism loves the economy of effort. If we can achieve what we need to achieve by the minimum of input, then our narcissism will direct us that way each and every single time.
I was just thinking that a lot of people comment saying they think that I'm you, because I guess for Americans it's just an English voice, so they think
so I'm actually you. Talking to yourself right now.
I was thinking how clever that would be if wouldn't that be clever?
That you are now talking to yourself. Yeah,
I'd have to be doing both.
You're doing really well.
I suppose I'd have to.
We are such a talented man.
We are. I suppose I would have had to have recorded you, like the bit of you first,
Yes.
and then I'd have to keep remembering what's going to be up there. It would be a really difficult,
Well,
unless the whole thing is scripted.
Just let me shuffle through the script here that you sent me.
No, I wouldn't have sent you a script though, would I? Because it's just me doing the script. That wouldn't make sense. But
you'd create a script so you know where you were up to. So you could record my bits by reading from the script and then do your bit from the script.
Yeah, but your bit, I wouldn't have put in the script. Let me just read through the script.
What you might have done to try and throw a bit of misdirection their way.
Exactly. That is what we've done.
See,
but Meghan and Harry, the thing that you've said, that frustrates me, and it frustrates me about wider celebrity culture as well. This jumping on any bandwagon, and I'm going to do all these things, and they don't bloody do anything. And I think people like you and me, I think as independent creators, particularly feel that, because you go and see, Meghan. I mean, how much was she paid to do this Spotify deal? How many episodes does she do? I'm doing 3 a week. You're putting like 20 things up a day on YouTube. We're both putting a million things. It's non-stop work. And she gets to just go like, oh, I wish I knew now. Was it 20 million or was it 100 million?
Well, for the Spotify rubbish, the figures vary. But if you say it's roughly 20 million, I think she did 8 episodes, didn't she? Now, of course, part of that might be, she's not necessarily trousering 20 million. There'll be production costs, etc. involved in, but nevertheless, it's a hefty wedge for the absolute beige dross that she generated, whereas you're creating quality material, I'm creating quality material, but that's the rub, isn't it? That there are so many people that do so, and then we can look. I mean, take Katie Price for example. What does she ever do in the world apart from have a big pair of knockers at the front of her? That was it. Her novels were ghostwritten. She'd just turn up and blether on, but she made millions. Lost it, of course, but again, she got the exposure, and it's the same with Harry's wife. All she does is get the exposure by virtue of being Harry's wife. That's why I call her that, because she's nothing without that name. Nobody's interested in her because she has nothing interesting to say, nothing meaningful. She talks in fridge magnet platitudes. She plagiarizes other people. She steals quotes from other people because she's such an empty vessel, which, of course, I've always maintained. I call him thick, her empty. And even South Park picked up on her emptiness, didn't they? When they had Harry flip open her head and then the echo inside. So she has nothing to offer. So it's understandable that people will feel frustrated because they think you are a talentless individual who's only been catapulted to fame and wealth by virtue of the man that you married.
If anyone's just tuned in for those last 2 seconds, we're talking about Meghan Markle, not me. HG Tudor's not giving me a dressing down. Yeah, well, it's Katie Price. Americans won't know. Any Americans listening or watching, that's a model who has, as HG Tudor says, big knockers. I suppose I respect that actually a little bit more because she's just sort of somebody who's come from nothing and has made something of the assets that they have, and has also embarked on lots of different business endeavors and what have you, without having to marry up, so to speak. And then marrying up, okay, it happens. But if you're going to be a beacon of feminist, hope, then I think achieving your goals by marrying up is not ideal, is it?
Well, you're right. It's laughable for her to maintain that I'm an independent feminist, strong feminist woman, when, first of all, her way in the world was forged by her father, paying for her tutelage and then ensuring that she was secured auditions as a virtue of him being in the industry already. Now, many parents, of course, do that for their children. But the point is, don't then go around trying to make out that you did it of your own volition when patently you didn't. But of course, as a narcissist, she will do, because she is the center of the universe. And then, of course, Trevor Engelson helped her in the industry because that was who he was involved in. And then you can see where she's taken bits of the chef, Corey Vitello, that she was in a relationship with, because she maintains that she was a foodie. She leveraged off his contacts in Toronto and the food aspect of what he did. And then, of course, with Prince Harry. So it's quite hilarious where she maintains, I'm an independent, strong feminist and girls of the world follow me. Oh, right. So what do you do then? Find a bloke, marry him and leech off him. That's how you do it, because that's all you've done.
Would you say if there was like one sign of narcissism that most aptly is embodied by her, what might that be?
The emptiness. She's empty, vacuous. There's nothing.
But that's
there.
not okay. What do we really mean by empty? Because obviously, okay, I got the South Park thing, and I found it funny, and there was an echo in her head when he was like shouting in there. It was funny, but empty. She's still, you know. I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been thinking about consciousness and the what's it called? The what's the front of your brain called? Precortical something. Do you know this?
Prefrontal cortex.
Right. So apparently, fish don't have that. Did you know that?
Okay. Yeah. I do now.
So fish don't have that thing. So
that's probably why they spend their life swimming around in their own shit.
Yeah, well, there you go. And I've stopped doing that years ago. So, right. So they can't sort of have consciousness. That's what's believed anyway about the brain. And then different animals, blah, blah, blah. And obviously, you know, we've got the biggest proportion of prefrontal cortex compared to the rest of our brains. So what, in that context, what does it mean for Meghan and you being one yourself to be empty?
Well, the emptiness is the fact that with her, there's no substance to her. So there's no substance, and so she has to bolt on bits from other people in order to create what the world sees. Also, there is the experience of the emptiness within, which as a pure narcissist, she has to fight against by gathering fuel to make the sensation of that emptiness go away for as long as she possibly can. So what happens is that she feels that sense of, it's like an anxiety, a nagging itch, and it's the presence of the emptiness. She won't know that that's what it actually is, but she experiences it. And her narcissism causes her to fight against that. So that's why she's so thirsty for attention, because she has to get that fuel. She has to get that fuel coming in to try and fill up her emptiness. So it's a combination of the fact that there is this chasm that's there that she needs to fill, and also the fact that when you look at her, there is, other than the mediocre acting, and remember, all narcissists are actors because they're chameleons. So all she's done is monetize part of her personality.
When you speak of Meghan in this way, I sense disdain, which is fair enough. But obviously, as we touched on before, you being admittedly a narcissist yourself, how do you sort of square that? And why the disdain for her and not like, oh, I recognize another one of me, you know?
Because she's an inferior type to me.
There we go. and inferior in what sense?
Inferior in the sense that she makes schoolgirl errors, that she has no awareness. Admittedly, she's probably wealthier than I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's doing all right, isn't she?
But she's not as effective at what she does. And she's more famous than I am. But I don't really care for the fame. It's not why I'm in it. The legacy, yes, but not the fame in the sense that she's in it for. But she is inferior to me in the sense of lacks awareness. She is more haphazard with the application of her manipulations. So she suffers the collateral consequences. It comes back and bites her on the backside repeatedly. And she's cowardly. She puts up this image of being kind and caring, and then behind the scenes is a nasty piece of work. I'm charming and entertaining and fun to be around, and then if you cross me, you'll find out about it later. But in the context of what I do here, I'm entirely upfront about what I am.
Yeah, I get that. I think...
and I don't hold myself out in real life as being a kind and caring person. I don't operate that facade. Mine is more about being effective at what I do. I don't have time to sort of go, oh, are you all right? I know how to say that to somebody, but I don't even effect that to people. I'm known amongst family and friends that if something happens to you, do not expect me to come with tea and sympathy. That isn't the way that I function. If you've got a problem, come to me and talk about it. I might be able to solve it for you if it suits me. But I'm very direct with it. I'll say, you need to do this, this, and this, and tell people things that they might not want to hear, but I'm right in what I'm saying. I don't go around pretending that I care, which is what Harry's wife does. And the passive aggressiveness of her, the cowardly manner, the schoolgirl errors that she makes,
to
my mind, she lets down the side.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is it a case of laying down the side? Because I remember as a child, my when I was a child, not always getting on as well with my brother, who I love and get on with very well now. But when I was younger, a lot of what he did, I found excruciatingly annoying and frustrating. And I've come to learn in later life, in my 30s, that I think a lot of that was him maybe giving up the game a little bit, because obviously there's probably nobody genetically more similar to me in the world than him. And is maybe I felt that he did things in certain ways because he was a bit younger that gave up the game or let the side down and showed people what we were really thinking. And I think we almost hate the things in ourselves to an extent, but it's also hating people giving up the game. So I guess, is that what it is? Because I mean, your channel now, I mean, there's a lot of Meghan stuff, and I sense real ire.
Well, there's still more non-Harry's wife stuff than there is of Harry's wife stuff. It's still outnumbered. I find her boring, but a very useful case study, and lots of people watch it. Hence, it behooves me to be a complete prostitute and use that material to extend the reach. It makes sense. It's useful lessons. There's so much material that's generated by her and the media that one can access. There's so much interest. And of course, many people come to me and they will email me, Andrew, and write, I didn't know anything about narcissism, and then I watched Harry's wife and it made me realize that this person may well be one, or it suddenly caused me to wake up as to what I'm dealing with. So that served its purpose. I'd mentioned previously elsewhere, there is a degree of frustration that one can create a video that gives people life-saving and livelihood-saving information about narcissism, and it gets a tenth of the views that a Harry's wife video gets, but that tells you everything you need to know about what's wrong with the world.
Because I do a fair few videos on Meghan and Tom Cruise and Scientology, and it is just the nature of YouTube. I mean, this is an audio podcast as well, and it was very different because it didn't have the discoverability that YouTube does. It was just either people listen to the podcast or they don't, or they see it on social media, they click on it, whatever. Whereas YouTube, it's like a video starts to snowball and goes wild, and then you go, well, I could do another one about the esoteric, intellectual, highbrow something or other about the cerebral cortex of a fish, but it will get like 50 views. Or I could do one about Meghan again, and it will get 500,000 views, and that's gonna, pay towards my new mortgage or whatever it might be. People often comment underneath saying, God, you're obsessed with, say, Tom Cruise. Oh, you're obsessed with him. My response is typically, no, you are. You're obsessed with him because you're here clicking on the video. With no other incentive, I suppose. But it's also just, they are, I mean.
Well, I often think it's a rather lazy observation. I get that occasionally by people saying, you're obsessed with Harry's wife. And I go, not in the slightest. If you actually go to the evidence and determine the number of videos that I do as a whole, she's still in the minority. Also, if you were to examine what I do on a daily basis, she forms a mere splinter of my time. I do lots of other things. If I was obsessed with her, I would be focused on her. I would have cushions with her face on. That's obsession. I can tell you very clearly I do not.
Dartboards, maybe.
So my day, if I was to go through each moment of my day and categorize it, and then we did a pie chart at the end, you would have to have a line coming outside of the pie chart to describe her section. It wouldn't be large enough to write on it itself because she's only a very small proportion. But people are lazy, and it's an easy thing to say, oh, you're obsessed. But as I always encourage my viewers and clients, you must go to the evidence and examine the evidence properly. In any situation you find yourself in, you'll find yourself surprised by what you find there, and you will invariably find an outcome that's better than you realize, because people make assumptions and it causes them to be anxious or fearful based on that assumption. And when you take them to the actual evidence, and I really enjoy doing it with the quarter wits that turn up and say, oh, you're obsessed with her. Take them through the evidence and you prove that they're wrong. It doesn't matter to me whether they accept that or not. Generally speaking, they don't. But it proves to everybody else the way that you construct an argument and go to the evidence. I mean, how many videos have you done about Tom Cruise?
It might be
roughly
quite a lot. It's hard because a lot of them are Scientology and not necessarily him, but I might have his face in the thumbnail or something. So I don't know, but it could be 50.
Okay. And what's that as a proportion of your overall videos?
I'm trying to see if it says how many videos I've done. But I do like 10 videos a week now, and I've been going for a couple of years.
Right. Okay. So even if you've done that in the course of the year, and let's say you've done 500 videos in a year on that basis, the cruiser is but 10%. That I would put very firmly that falls below the obsession threshold. Case closed.
Well, even if I were obsessed with Tom Cruise or Meghan, or not obsessed, sorry, even if I were focused entirely on that, it was a channel just about Tom Cruise and Meghan, I think it's also maybe we're struggling as a society to get to grips with the concept of the independent creator and what we are, because there's this parasocial interaction and there's this kind of back and forth and there's the friendliness, and that is all very real. But then there's I suppose we're expected to only ever follow like our interests, and our interests must be profound. I suppose saying you're obsessed with Meghan, if someone labels that at you, it's a little bit like turning up at an accountancy and saying, you guys are obsessed with numbers. Look at you. You've done numbers again today. Yeah. Not again. More numbers. It's like, well, that's my job, I suppose.
Exactly. Well, it's simply, no, this is a channel about narcissism. It's not tittle-tattle about, a particular aspect where on other channels, and those other channels are about the gossip. That's what they exist for, and they're allowed to exist for that. There's no rule that says you're not allowed to gossip about Harry's wife. You can. If you want to speculate about whether she was pregnant or not, you're entitled to do so within the parameters that are set by the terms of service, obviously for the host of the channel on which you're operating. But the fact is, I always explain to people, make it very clear, my channel's all about narcissism and psychopathy. Occasionally, they'll throw something in there which is a bit more towards the entertainment angle, but it's still linked, because what are you getting? Me, a narcissistic psychopath, entertaining you. So that's still narcissism and psychopathy.
That's true. That's true. Me. It's a meta way of ensuring there is some level of narcissism on your channel, whether it be the subjects about whom you speak or you yourself.
Yeah.
I suppose the issue is, here's the ethical issue, and here's something that I think about when talking about Meghan, and it even crosses my mind with Tom Cruise, and I'm so sure that he is bad. What if we're wrong? Because neither of us are doctors. What if we're wrong about Meghan or Tom? I know that Tom Cruise he's done things on a different level to Meghan. I mean, he sent, from what I've heard, ex-girlfriends to clean their bathroom with a toothbrush and stuff like that. So, but what if we're wrong?
Well, the short answer is we're not, because I know, for example, I don't just do a sort of back of the fact packet analysis of somebody and go, oh, yes, they're a narcissist. I look at a lot of evidence, way more than I actually talk about. And if ever I was challenged, not that that ever would happen, I've got reams of notes showing all of the analysis that I've undertaken. And at the end of the day, I make it clear that, no, I'm not a doctor, that I don't hold psychological qualifications. And therefore, if you watch, you can make your own judgment. As I'm very much of the basis of giving people the maturity to make their own minds up about what they are watching and listening to.
Join me on The Edge for new episodes every week. Start watching right now.